Hi, everyone. This message is just being sent to kind of give you an update as far as your summer assignment, to check in, to give you a little bit of a nudge. Being the end of July, my hope is that you've got your assignment underway, or at least you've got a plan blocked out as far as how you're going to be able to get your summer assignment completed. With your summer assignment, if you are feeling any of these emotions, if you are feeling the book is boring, or I don't want to do this, or any of those other sorts of sensations, you are experiencing what college life then starts to feel like, where you are reading a book and working on a subject that is going to be a challenge. And you'll also notice that there are no amusement parks that are made up of textbook readings because of the fact that what you're doing right now is work. But our hope is that by giving you time and the ability to break this up over large periods of the summer, the hope is that you'll be able to do it bit by bit, bite-sized chunk by bite-sized chunk, and be able to successfully have your 4 chapters read by the time that you come back in the fall. For you guys also, what I'd like to highlight for you though is why you're doing what you're doing. And in particular, this is meant to give you an idea of what's going on with your reading. When it comes to this course, one of the biggest determinations beyond reading ability and intellectual ability is maturity for whether or not success is going to happen in this course. And it's the realization that, first of all, you're being asked to do hard work, and it does take time and dedication to be able to do that. Number two, though, a lot of people get the mistaken impression that with APUS history, this is like Jeopardy, where the only thing that you're worried about is just the completion of your reading. And the hard thing to share with kids and with parents is the fact that when it comes to the textbook reading that you're doing for your summer assignment, some kids will come back in the fall and they'll be eager to turn in their notes or show that their work is done. And the course itself is less concerned about completion of your reading, and it's more about comprehension and understanding of your reading. And even more so, it's about actually being able to use the knowledge that you've gained to perform historical thinking skills. So let me show you what that looks like. At the top of your Schoology resources that you have for the summer is your AP History course description. And they just redid this past year. Not that they've added anything new. Instead, what they have done is they have given more detail to what we were being expected to do in the past. So let me expand this out a little bit. And so what you'll notice with U.S. history is when we take a look at your concept outline, the first thing that I want to highlight for you is you're working on periods 1 and 2 during this summer. And with periods 1 and 2, you'll notice that those two periods are not the same sort of weight as the rest of the course is going to be. And so when I think about your summer assignment, if you have problems completing your summer assignment, we're going to be just fine, strictly from the standpoint that I'm going to be expected to help you understand what is going on with U.S. history. And if you read this and you have some issues, we'll be returning to that information throughout the entire course. So do your best in getting completed, reading your stuff. If you have any questions, make sure you bring them with you to start the school year. But it's understood that this stuff, by just reading the textbook on your own, you'll understand part of it. You're going to need my help to get more of it. As you move forward, though, there are going to be 8 threads that run throughout your course. And so when you're reading your textbook, a lot of kids will get really bothered by, do I need to memorize every fact? Do I need to memorize every year? And the key thing to think about is that when it comes time for you to be assessed at the end of the year for college credit, there will be a multiple choice test, but the majority of the assessment is going to be writing 3 short answer essay questions, a long answer essay question, and a document-based question. They'll be asking you to explore these themes. And so one of the themes is American and national identity. And essentially, this is just trying to figure out how it was that we developed the idea of what it means to be an American and how that has changed over time in these categories. So think about the reading that you've done. And there's a good chance that once you start reading, especially when you learn about Europeans arriving in America and interacting with Native Americans, you'll see things in your first 4 chapters that you'll go, oh, this is totally where this American idea came from, whether it was independence or democracy or freedom of speech or a whole bunch of other different things. Theme 2, work exchange and technology. How did our economy develop into what we have now, which is called capitalism, where you and I are working to try to figure out ways to make money for ourselves and to become independently wealthy. Geography and the environment. We're going to be examining both how Americans interact with the environment, and that how that shapes and molds the cultures, kind of like what you learned in human geography last year. Migration and settlement, both push and pull factors for internal and external migration. Politics, how did that develop over time? Our foreign policy, what is our American culture and how did that develop? And what are our social structures like as far as how people live and interact in our societies? So for you, when you're thinking about your reading, you're reading and you're learning basic facts, but any fact that you're reading about in your textbook is going to be linked to one of these themes that we're going to be exploring throughout the course of the year. So again, when you think about your summer assignment, the ending is not just completing your reading. Your reading will allow us to then explore these threads over time. And as you read upcoming chapters throughout the year, we'll be able to keep returning to the question of what makes Americans Americans, or how has our economy developed from where we were with agriculture and farming to where we are nowadays with a much more advanced and sophisticated economy, and so on. As I move forward down here, the next element I need to share with you is the fact that as you guys are working on this course, let me backtrack. You're also going to be working on develop historical thinking skills. And what we do is we use the information that you're reading inside your textbook to demonstrate these abilities. And what you'll find with these skills is they go from lower level skills to higher level skills. Starting off with, can you just identify historical concepts, processes, developments, and also can you over here identify patterns or connections that you can see taking place? Now you'll notice that these two skills are important for U.S. history, and for a lot of my kids when they enter the course, they imagine that this is what our course is about. But our skills go from lower level to higher level. So throughout the course of the year, we're going to want to just go from identifying who were the Anasazi to explaining how they ended up living the way that they did in the climate and geography that they're in. Throughout the course of the year also, we will need to be able to do these following skills. We're going to need to work with primary and secondary sources. We're going to need to figure out how to read those sources. We're going to need to figure out how to take events and connect them to bigger trends or movements. We'll also need to figure out how to do argumentation, which is a skill that's going to require us to be able to pull off in writing a really good argument using the facts that you're learning from your textbook. So for you guys, the key that I'm hoping when we're working with this is the fact that when you come in the fall, if you don't do your summer assignment, it doesn't mean that you're bad and it doesn't mean that you're kicked out of the course. It just means you've got a lot of work to do. And during those first 2 weeks, we're going to be working on then introducing the rest of these skills, assuming that you've already done this and this, which is your textbook reading. So all I wanted to do, especially at the end of July, is just highlight for you what you can do to make yourself safe over the next month. And if you haven't even started your summer assignment yet, you've totally got enough time to be able to pull that off by blocking out chunks of reading and keeping yourself safe. You also have 3 other skills, though, that I'd like to highlight for you, located right here. What they're going to be expecting you to do in writing on the AP test is they're going to be asking you to do compare-contrast essays. So when you're reading, you should be looking for things inside your reading that seem to be this sort of skill. Now, this is a basic historical skill, but they want to be able to perform this skill while also using evidence. So they're going to be checking to see, can you do compare-contrast? As you'll see with like different Native American groups, or else in chapters 1 through 4, you read about the Spanish and the British colonization attempts. That's especially where you'll want to flash the skills. So when you're reading, if you're reading about the Spanish and you're reading about the British, don't just read and jot down facts alone. Be thinking about, how are the Spanish doing things different than the British? How are people in the Chesapeake and New England doing things different? A second skill is cause and effect. Can you do cause and effect where you can explain these different things caused an event to take place, or else these were the effects of a certain moment? A great way to think about that is the Columbian Exchange. Columbian Exchange is going to cause a lot of changes, and it's also going to have the impact of changing Native Americans for the better in some ways by giving them access to European materials, but also for the worse because of diseases and warfare that comes. This is continuity and change, also known as the CCOT, where we'll have to be able to explain after a certain moment, let's say like the conquistadors arriving in chapters 1 and 2, what things changed and what things stayed the same from that moment on. All of these skills require the basic facts that you guys are working on from your textbook. That's right here and right here. So if you can do that during the summer, I'll be able to help you out with the rest. For you guys also, if you are intimidated by anything you're seeing, we very much have good, positive results for our kids, where many kids come in and they're nervous to begin with. And I promise you that I'll be working throughout the course of the year to scaffold upwards. And so you're not going to be expected to do all these skills with mastery early in the year. It's just bit by bit, piece by piece. I'll add in skills as you're ready for them. And what I'll be assuming is that you're doing your part of the job of getting this and this done, your chapter reading, when I set a deadline for you. And so if you get that done, you should be in great shape. There are some kids also who, when they come into the course, they'll be kind of anxious when they come in because they'll want to make sure that they're doing right. And so if you scan forward in this document that is now the first link on your Schoology group page, if you scan all the way down here to what's called the unit guides, you are currently doing the work for units 1 and 2. In unit 1, 1491 to 1607, this is essentially saying that they want you to know Native American history from the period prior to European arrival with Columbus in 1492, and they really don't have a beginning date that they can put firmly out there, so they're just saying 1491, but that's code for Native American history prior to European arrival, and 1607 is the Jamestown colony, the start of Virginia. If you scan forward then, what you'll notice is they tell you on these pages coming up what you should be noticing. They'll tell you how to contextualize, which means they'll be able to explain to you what is the bigger trend or movement that they want to be thinking about when you read these chapters. And in particular, they want to be able to say, explain the context for European encounters in the Americas from 1491 to 1607. This is your context. Native populations were already in America. They were diverse and they had adapted to their environment. And when contact took place, it resulted in the Columbian Exchange. And so they want you, with all the stuff you're learning in chapters 1 and 2, to be thinking about the Columbian Exchange as the bigger trend that all those facts fit into. As I scan forward, these are all the topics that you're supposed to be noticing with your reading. And so we want to be an open book. There's nothing that's meant to be mysterious about your work in this class. Instead, you're figuring out how to build up enough evidence and ability to be able to write a good essay about any of these topics. This topic, Native American societies before European contact, they do want you to be able to explain how and why these Native American populations interacted with their natural environment. And so when you're reading about different Native American groups, if you're tempted to ask how many you need to know, you need an example of a Native American group that would actually be able to show this concept. You'd need another Native American group for this concept, another one for this, another one for this, and if you can go further and have 2 or 3, you look really impressive. But that's essentially what we're building you up towards. Now, what you should be thinking about is this: if this seems really hard, this is what we work on during our first 2 weeks together. And so just get your reading done. I'll help ease you through this process, but just be aware that that's what you're doing with your reading. The next topic they want you to know, European exploration in the Americas. And in particular, they want you to be able to think about it in the context of how America interacts with the rest of the world. And these developments, like European nations' efforts to explore and conquer the New World, stemmed from these motivations coming from Europe. So when they describe that in your textbook, you'll want to be able to then highlight those facts that you're learning and connect it back to this bigger topic. The remaining topics, Columbian Exchange, Spanish exploration, conquest, labor, slavery, and the caste system in the Spanish colonial system, like the encomienda system that you'll read about in your chapters. Interactions between Europeans, Native Americans, and Africans. Most likely, if you've started your summer assignment, you're seeing these headings and you're like, I remember learning a little bit about this, and I remember that that's the goal. We're not looking for you to have mastery when you come back day 1. We just want you to be aware of what you're doing, that your reading will help us to explore these topics with some depth. As I move forward then, they are laying out for you that they want to be able to see the skill of cause and effect, explaining the effects that the transatlantic trade had and voyages had, and then they give you the answer over here on the right-hand side. And so if you look through this, when you wrap up a time period in your textbook, if you're thinking to yourself, man, I read all this stuff and I don't even know what I'm supposed to know, this helps you to figure out what you're supposed to know. As I scan forward, period 2, that's chapters 2, 3, and 4. And in particular, this is Jamestown all the way up until the French and Indian War. As I scan forward, same sort of structure, and they'll be printing out these things for you throughout the course of the year so that you've got them. But this context is it's saying to you, they want you to understand what are the bigger trends and movements that are going on during the period of English colonization. And they developed a variety of colonies, in particular Spanish, French, Dutch, and British. And then the British colonies were very different from one another. And what I would encourage you to pay attention to when you're reading chapters 2, 3, and 4, notice the differences between Virginia and Massachusetts. Those are the key ones that the College Board will focus on. That will also oftentimes be called Chesapeake and New England. And that's going to give you the foundation for how did our northern colonies and our southern colonies and eventually our northern states and our southern states grow up in ways that will eventually lead us towards the Civil War, tension over civil rights. And even nowadays, you'll notice there are cultural differences between North and South that still remain. As you scan forward, they want you to be able to explain European colonization, the regions of British colonies along the East Coast. There are 4 of them: Chesapeake, New England, Middle, and Southern. They want you to understand the transatlantic trade, and factoring into that the slave trade also would be huge. This is the Columbian Exchange. Triangular trade is contained inside this section right here. And they do want you to understand what were interactions like between American Indians and all Europeans, not just the British, but also the French and the Spanish, as you read about them inside your textbook. They want you to understand slavery when you're reading about it. But the College Board is very straightforward because of the fact that they realize you're going to be kind of confused as you're working right throughout the year. So like you can see right here, they do want you to understand colonial society and culture. What did people believe? What were their religions? How did they interact with one another? What things impacted the way that they thought? And then they're talking about doing a compare-contrast. And as you can see with compare-contrast, they're using it as their focus, differences between the different European colonies and how they interact with Native Americans, and then also how the British colonies were very different from one another. At this point, you'll then be to Unit 3, which we will then be focusing on as we move to late September, early October. My hope is not to scare you, and so if you find yourself frustrated or nervous or you feel overwhelmed, you should feel free to contact me either with my email, j_hohenstein@ardale.org, or through the messenger that we've got on Schoology. You aren't expected to be perfect at this point. You aren't expected to pull off all of the skills that I've shown to you, and none of this is meant to scare you away or make you frustrated. The way that I teach instead is I'm very clear at the beginning of the year what expectations are out there for you to be able to have the best success that you want. And so I'm assuming that at the end of the school year, you would like to have a fighting chance to get a good score on the AP test. Some of you have the goal of getting a 4 or a 5, which is a superior score on the AP test. My feeling then is as you start working on your summer assignment, it would be best for you to know what the eventual standard is going to be. But all the stuff that I showed you, the themes, the skills, and the content, the College Board is very clear that they're not expecting you to be good at doing those things until you get to the AP test in May. Now, that doesn't mean that we should hold off until May on trying to become as good as we can be. But what I want you to remember is with your skills, remember the skills page from the beginning of the presentation I started making today. Skill 1 and 5 is just about, can I read a textbook and identify specific facts from U.S. history? For some of you, that's going to be a challenge during your summer assignment, especially because with the reading, it is a little bit more complex and collegiate than what you've done in the past. 5 is looking for connections and making links, which is those historical thinking skills: compare, contrast, cause and effect, continuity, change over time, contextualization. For you guys, though, it's also the summer. And so for you guys, I do not want you to be stressed out through the summer and be frustrated and worried, because that's not what summer is supposed to be. And that's not what this assignment is supposed to be. This assignment is strictly supposed to be when you come back in the fall. If you have your notes done, chapters 1 through 4 notes, you'll be able to bring them to class with me. And then I'll be able to lay out for you ideas that I have to make your note taking better. And then you'll be able to determine if you feel like your note taking is sufficient or if you want to make tweaks. We'll then start doing activities in class where we don't do chapters 1 through 4 on the first day. So when you show up on the first day, don't offer to turn in your notes at that time. Your notes are for you. I'll be grading them as part of my grade, but they're a very minimal part of the grade. They're meant to be a tool to help you to write better essays and to do better on multiple choice tests. So if you discover during the first 2 weeks that your notes aren't where you want them to be at the end of the first 2 weeks, I'm going to be thrilled because you'll have become a much better college student, much better prepared for that transition, and that's all this class is supposed to be. For you guys then, as a goal, have chapters 1 through 4 read when you come back at the beginning of the school year. If you're not done, then just understand that you'll have some reading to do because you'll be testing on chapters 1 through 4 with a multiple choice test after our first 2 weeks together. We will then break apart piece by piece chapters 1 through 4 and make sense out of that material. And you'll be able to ask whatever questions you want to. And then my technique is the night before we take a test, I'll run an online review session where you'll be able to ask any questions that you want to at the last minute. But you'll also have fair game to ask any questions you want to during any of the class sections during those first 2 weeks. And that becomes the normal for my class. So my hope is that you understand what the AP test is looking for. I'm hoping you understand what my methodology is. I'm hoping you also feel comfortable and not frightened. And if you do feel any of those sensations, please feel free to let me know so I can help you out. I hope you have a great rest of the summer. I look forward to seeing you at the beginning of September, and please let me know if I can help out in any way. Thanks.